Great, well tēnā koutou katoa and a very good morning everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you here to Outset Ventures today for the launch of the Government's second emissions reduction plan. Outset Ventures represents the forefront of innovation, serving as both an early stage investment fund and as a hub for technology incubation. It supports deep tech startups in their journey to the world stage. This is a very fitting venue to launch today, with world-leading climate innovation being a key pillar of the government's climate strategy, and technology and innovation being a chapter in the final emissions reduction plan. I want to acknowledge Matt and the Outset Ventures team for hosting us. After the stand-up, we will have an opportunity to tour some of the labs that are driving climate innovation here at Outset Ventures. I also want to acknowledge my Cabinet colleagues and coalition partners for the work in regards to putting together the second emissions reduction plan. New Zealand stands at a critical point in addressing the challenges of climate change. That is why I am proud to announce the Government's second emissions reduction plan, our blueprint for emissions reduction over the next 5 years. Our plan shows that we can meet climate targets while still supporting a thriving economy. Our plan shows that we are on track to deliver our climate change targets, including our first emissions budget between 2022 and 2025, the second emissions budget from 2026 to 2030, and our 2030 methane target. Importantly, it also shows that we can meet our net zero target as early as 2044, and that is a significant improvement in terms of where we're at, and demonstrates again that the government is on track in terms of its net zero commitments. Our plan has targeted actions in sectors across our economy that produce the greatest emissions, including agriculture, transport, energy and waste. It also includes other areas that are going to be critical to meet our climate targets, such as New Zealand's emissions trading scheme and also sustainable finance. The plan has 8 key policies that will have the greatest potential in emission savings over the next 5 years. Enabling more renewable energy projects through Electrify New Zealand, recognising carbon capture, utilisation and storage in the New Zealand ETS, targeting a network of 10,000 EV charging points by 2030, introducing agricultural emissions pricing systems by 2030, and incentivising the uptake of new agricultural innovation technologies. Exploring private sector partnerships to plant trees on low conservation Crown-owned land. Introducing a regulated product stewardship scheme for refrigerants from 2025. Leveraging the Waste Management Fund to enable systems and infrastructure to process organic waste, and improving organic waste management and landfill gas capture to increase landfill gas recovery rates. A multi-sector approach ensures our responses drive down emissions. They're making sure that it is coordinated, cost-effective and efficient. However, the government cannot do this alone. Households, businesses and communities will make the critical difference in our journey alongside government direction. That's why our plan highlights the business-driven initiatives already in progress across New Zealand, such as Genesis's commitment to deliver 300,000 tonnes of biomass to Huntly Power Station by the end of the fiscal year 2028. This reflects an 80% reduction in coal utilisation by Huntly by 2028, without 1 cent of government funding in order to do that. This demonstrates, in one example, the private sector have the confidence in order to embark on decommissioning and decarbonisation, which have significant impacts for our economy. Collaborating with industry to encourage them to decarbonise more quickly is an important part of this second emissions reduction plan, as it will help us reach our climate goals faster. There have been some changes to the plan since we released our draft earlier this year. We have incorporated feedback we received during the consultation, which has been, as a result, added new sections to the plan, including a focus on technology and innovation and building and construction. These changes have been made since Consultation set us up for the third emissions budget period and take us even closer to meeting our long-term targets. Achieving the third emissions budget is the task of the third emissions reduction plan due by 2030. New Zealand stands at a critical point in addressing the challenges of climate change. Our plan demonstrates we can create a low emissions future for New Zealand, where our communities, economy and climate can thrive. Our plan demonstrates our commitment to action and tackling the issues head on. Our plan ensures that we will meet our emissions budgets and lays the foundations for a net zero economy as early as 2044 and supports our economy to thrive. Together, we can support a more sustainable future for New Zealand. And with that, I will take your questions.
Minister, the EV charging network is a real cornerstone of this plan, especially in transport, yet EV sales under this government have plummeted. How can you rely on the chargers to deliver lower emissions without the sales to back it up?
Well, look, our plan is clearly outlining that the important aspect to help increase EV uptake is around reducing range anxiety. The implementation and working with the private sector around putting EV charging infrastructure in place across New Zealand is one component of our plan in order to achieve that. Obviously, doubling the amount of renewable energy also ensures we have the electricity to enable that decarbonisation. But New Zealanders are already taking steps to move from fossil fuel vehicles to plug-in hybrids and EV vehicles. And we're seeing also recent reporting in regards to the cost price of those vehicles going down. And we're confident that that trajectory is going to continue.
The EV vehicles, though, will deliver a really small portion of emissions reduction under the second emissions budget, 0.01. Is that enough?
Well, the reality is that there's about 70 months between now and the end of that period. And so we do need to be realistic. New Zealanders are also doing it very tough in a cost of living crisis. Purchasing a new vehicle when times are tough at home is not normally the highest priority. But what we do know is that the price of those EV vehicles are coming down, and we're putting in place a charging infrastructure that reduces the anxiety about range anxiety, which is a major contributor in terms of considering when they do purchase vehicles.
But why haven't you concentrated on that? You've outlined that in your 8 key policies. You talked about Electrify NZ and the 10,000 EV charging points, but as my colleague over there suggested, it's actually not that great. So why have you decided to identify those?
Well, the reality is that it is a key element in terms of enabling the uptake. You've got to lay the foundations in place for people to be able to transition to that new model. And moving from fossil fuel vehicles to clean vehicles is a trajectory that is happening. It's happening in New Zealand, and that is a component that will enable people to start progressing in that manner. The actual emissions reduction specifically around that element is noted in the plan. But the bigger element is how do we ensure and help encourage New Zealanders to be able to move to those vehicles and move away from fossil fuel vehicles.
But if we can get greater savings in other areas, for example, agriculture, which is being pushed out, why not concentrate on those areas?
Well, look, as you can see in the plan, we've got a number of initiatives that we're implementing. The agricultural innovation pillar is a significant component. We're here in this building where we've got some of New Zealand's leading agricultural innovators and start-up businesses who will find and are finding the solutions to one of the most significant challenges in climate change around the world, and that is how we reduce biogenic methane from livestock. But this is a government that is supporting the private sector and innovators to reduce emissions, and that's what we're doing as part of this plan.
Are you committed to the dairy sector joining the ETS in 2030?
We've been clear that agriculture does not sit within the ETS. We've taken steps to remove it from the ETS, but what we are committed to is to ensure that we've got a pricing system in place by 2030 for agricultural emissions, and that is a critical step and a critical element of our plan. But importantly, we need to ensure that farmers have the tools to be able to reduce emissions. What the climate requires is emissions reductions and reductions in emissions, particularly from agriculture. And we need the solutions and the tools to do that in New Zealand, and businesses based right here in this building are part of that solution.
How reliant is the plan on untested and new technologies, both carbon capture and agricultural technologies, which over the years have always been delayed and under-delivered.
Well, let's be clear, one of the examples in agricultural innovation is EcoPond. That product is already available in the market. It's moving to a second generation product next year, which is cheaper and has greater impact. That is available now, and I expect that we're already seeing an uptake in terms of that. And
how many million tonnes will that reduce?
Well, in terms of the implications around EcoPond particularly, it's got a 92% reduction when that's implemented. The reality of methane that's related to, in effect, effluent ponds is in the region of 5% of methane on farm. There's no silver bullet that's going to solve all of this problem in one go, but our plan outlines about 15 different pathways, including animal genetics available from 2024 in sheep, that will help us on that pathway. We are a country that has always been at the forefront of innovation and taking risk in order to solve the biggest problems. And I'm confident in the New Zealand agricultural sector and our technology sector that we can do this. We do need to be supportive and confident of that sector. Are there risks? Yes. But I tell you what, the biggest risk is if we do nothing.
So
and we're not willing to do that.
On that, how much reduction in emissions do you get from this plan, which reduces the liability for the Paris Agreement for 2030? My calculations mean you're still 84 million tonnes short for 2030.
The Paris commitments, which is our international targets, which are different to our domestic targets in law, the plan outlines that the gap is around 84 million. It was 101 million in our draft plan, and so there's obviously been a reduction in that space. But what is clear and what is right is that our international targets are significantly challenging in order to meet, and we are focused around what we need to do in that regard to be able to meet those targets, and that will be my focus as we move into the early part of next year. So
the EU and the UK estimate to buy those credits by 2030 would cost $200 a tonne New Zealand. That's a $16 billion liability. Are you going to ask Treasury to book that liability in the Crown accounts?
There is no intent in terms of booking that liability in the accounts as it stands. Treasury advice that Minister of Finance and I have already sought indicates that is not at a point at which this should be treated as a liability, and we take on board that technical advice.
So you're forecasting 84 million tonnes short. The official forecasts from our trading partners is $200 a tonne. Why is that not a liability? It's only 2030.
Well, the reality is there are a number of estimates in terms of the fiscal cost to close that gap. What we are very aware of, and we're standing again in a business that's undertaking technology innovation. If you think about rapid deployment of agricultural innovation tech, some of the tech available, including the boluses for dairy, reduce methane by up to 75%. These are game-changer scenarios and could be available earlier than what we think. There is a degree of risk around when these items are coming along, but there is a degree of uncertainty on the timing. What we as a government are focused on is accelerating the uptake and deployment of this technology, and we need to be cognitive that 2035 is not tomorrow. There is still time between that. 2030 is not tomorrow.
6 years
but there is a significant... Well, you could think about where technology will be in 4 years from today. I don't think you could necessarily say where it will be. Technology deployment is significant, and I think we have to back our innovators in this country that they will find the solutions to our problems.
But the Climate Commission says that you need to lock in changes now with action now rather than waiting for technology to turn around. Are you ignoring their advice?
No, that's exactly what our plan does. We're doubling renewables by 2050. Our fast-track legislation has 3 gigawatts of additional energy production consented. That's a 30% increase in the amount of energy generation in this country, and that's legislation that's going around in the moment. We've got work around afforestation on Crown land, significant work also happening in agricultural innovation. This is a government that is not sitting on its hands. We are taking action, and we have a credible plan in order to meet our domestic targets.
Will you be buying international credits to meet our Paris Agreement?
Cabinet has not made a decision in regards to the purchase of international credits in order to meet NDC. Those are considerations that will be done in the future.
So the Agriculture and Trade Minister says that won't happen.
As I said, at this stage, Cabinet has not made any decisions in regards to that.
So are you going to tell the European Union and the UK that at the moment you don't have a plan that gets you to the 84 million. You're not committing to buying credits, and therefore you're most likely to renege on your Paris Agreement, and therefore those two trade agreements.
Well, look,
are
I've just come back from a United Nations meeting on climate change in Azerbaijan only a few weeks ago. I met directly with Ed Miliband, who's the UK Minister of Net Zero and Climate. I outlined the work that we have underway in regards to agricultural innovation and agricultural emissions reduction in particular. We have a lot to work on together, and the reality is that we do have a challenge in regards to our international targets. But today is about outlining this government's plan to meet our domestic targets, which are in domestic law. And our plan will deliver the first and second target and get us on a pathway to net zero by 2044. That is a positive development. And yes, climate is challenging and difficult, and we will continue to work hard at this. But right now, today, we're outlining where we are on the domestic front.
So why have you changed your least cost priority in the draft plan to cost effective?
We've taken feedback in regards to the consultation from a number of stakeholders around what that means, including quite significant feedback from rangatahi and younger and youth New Zealand. We wanted to be sure and be clear that when we talk about a low-cost pathway, that represents the fact that we can only spend $1 once. And we want to ensure that any money that the government is spending on behalf of the taxpayer gets maximum benefit. And that's what we're flowing through as part of this plan.
How much are you willing to spend, therefore, to actually reduce emissions? Because at this point, it looks like you're not spending much.
Well, I'll give you an example back in terms of the Huntly example. You know, an 80% reduction in coal. That's a hell of a lot of less coal trucks driving from Auckland to Huntly as a result of that. That organisation is taking that step without any government funding. That is a significant success. It demonstrates that private sector in New Zealand under this government have the confidence to undertake that investment. And I expect that other companies, Fonterra, Synlait, Open Country, will also take some leadership in regards to emissions reduction, which they're already doing, to be fair, to ensure that they are also playing their part.
So why are you planning to keep including forestry and add in carbon capture to our emissions trading scheme when the rest of the world doesn't do that?
Well, because we've got a net zero target, and net means that we account for both gross emissions reduction and removals, and forestry is a key component of the removals element of our equation. We've been very clear that that will remain part of the New Zealand ETS. You've seen the work we've been done around making sure that we've got a credible ETS market, and I think the results speak for themselves in terms of the policy changes we've made in that space. We have got a more credible market than what we inherited, and we believe and will continue to support forestry being part of it.
But are you relying too heavily on those carbon capture technologies in forestry planting when many of the tech is as yet developed and untried in New Zealand?
No, we're not. We're acknowledging that there is not one single pathway to achieve these targets. Multiple pathways will be required. Our plan outlines multiple pathways that we will be supporting to hit our targets, in addition to the work that the private sector will also take. This is not all on government to deliver our targets. We need to work together with private sector NGOs in order to do that, and this plan demonstrates
You
that.
say multiple pathways, but for your agricultural emissions, you're relying mostly on mitigation technologies, and advocates say that you've got to use other tools in the toolbox, like reducing stock numbers. Are you only using half of your tools here?
Well, with respect to some of those stakeholders, their view is that we should decimate the New Zealand herds for both dairy, sheep and beef. Well, they also don't understand that the New Zealand economy is reliant on those sectors. Decimation of those herds decimates the New Zealand economy. That is simply not a practical pathway in order to support the New Zealand economy to pay for public services we all expect and hit our emission targets. There is a pathway in order to reduce emissions in agriculture that doesn't involve reducing herds, and that's through agricultural innovation. And we've got a large number of pathways underway right here in New Zealand by New Zealand businesses, by Kiwis, that will be able to provide a pathway to get us on that journey.
But isn't that redundant if you lose the free trade agreements with the EU and the UK because you miss your Paris deal?
It's absolutely not redundant. This work is underway right here, right now, today. This work is happening on farm in New Zealand. That is irrespective, and also the solutions that we find in this country will benefit other countries around the world. You think about Ireland, which is pastoral farming. The solutions around animal genetics for Sheep and beef for dairy will benefit other countries. We can and will play a part to help other countries also reduce agricultural emissions, which, by the way, is probably one of the most complex areas of emissions reduction across a broader economy.
So do you actually expect that by the time you get to 2030, 2035, everyone else will have pulled out of Paris or reneged on it and you can just say, well, we did our best?
No, I don't, and I absolutely am confident that the partners and countries are committed to the Paris Agreement. We were in COP only a few weeks ago. 195 countries are committed in terms of meeting their Paris commitments. Are countries having challenges and difficulties in terms of what they've said? Yes, this is not an easy pathway, but what I came away from that meeting is with a clear understanding that with a clear consensus by countries around the world, all countries around the world, if we work together in order to achieve these targets, then we're going to be in a better place. We must do what we can to maintain temperature increases below the rate. We are supportive absolutely around 1.5. Our Pacific countries rely on us around that, and our plan in my front opening line of my statement reinforces our support for the 1.5.
And would you actually take any climate action that reduces economic growth?
The reality is that all investment has different implications in terms of the economy. What we do know in terms of the modelling that there is impacts in terms of our economy as a result of decarbonisation. But there are also positive implications. If you think about afforestation, that will create many jobs within our regions that will be involved in that broader forestry sector that don't exist today. You think about the jobs that will be created as a result of agricultural innovation and tech startups here in New Zealand and other countries. That is creating high-paid jobs for Kiwis today and in the future. That is a positive pathway for New Zealand, and it demonstrates that achieving our climate targets is also going to be positive for the New Zealand economy.
And do you also expect that at some point Treasury is going to have to make a final decision on whether to book that liability?
Well, look, the reality is that there will be continued review in terms of that position. As you know, I'm a finance background individual, and I understand how that works probably better than anyone. The reality is there is still a significant amount of unknowns in regards to the estimation of the actual costs, the mechanisms, and the pathways around that. But that is work that will continue to be reassessed regularly.
Should we have a plan there? The $16 billion, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, what is the plan if we don't make these technological leaps and bounds that you're suggesting?
Well, look, we've been in government for 12 months. We have now a plan that will ensure that we meet our domestic targets, which are in New Zealand domestic law. That has been my priority, and that is what I am accountable. We are also acknowledge the international targets that we emit. We're also setting the next NDC target for 2035, which is currently work that is underway. And yes, we've said again, there is challenges in regards to the gap for the target that was set by the prior government. I did not inherit a viable plan to hit the 2030 NDC target from the prior government. That is work that this government is having to work through. And yes, it is difficult, and yes, it is challenging, but we remain and absolutely focused around intending to meet that target.
And how ambitious do you want to be with that next NDC?
We're taking feedback, we're getting consultation in regards to the New Zealand public, we're taking a look at what we believe is able to be achieved and what degree of ambition is around that, and we'll be making more updates and announcements around that. We are planning to ensure that we have an update on that in the new year.
Can you imagine a methane pricing scheme which means that farmers or consumers have to pay more because of the high prices?
Look, what I can imagine is a world where we've got solutions to reduce biogenic methane on farm. And what I want to ensure that we are deploying that technology and ensuring that's being rolled out across the industry. How we do that, one mechanism in order to incentivise that is through pricing of that, which we do have as part of our plan. But actually, I want to create and get to a point where New Zealand and New Zealand farmers have the tools that they actually are going to be doing that without the need for the state to intervene. And I think the reality is that we're operating on both pathways. We're backing tech, we're putting in place ensuring that we've got a pricing system to come into play. But we also acknowledge that there is time between now and then, and a lot will change in that regard. But we do need to move rapidly to reduce emissions across our entire economy, and that includes agriculture.
What did you think of Rod Carr's proposal that the government aim for net negative by 2050, not neutral?
Yeah, look, you know I can't comment in regards to that specific thing. The government is considering the Climate Change Commission's advice, and we'll provide updates in regards to that. What our plan demonstrates today is what we believe through consultation with New Zealanders and New Zealand industry and households is practical and credible in order to meet our targets, and that's what we've delivered today.